My name is Cora, and I am 33 years old. I will never forget the day my family sat around a long, cold table to hear the reading of my grandmother's will. My cousin looked me right in the eyes and called me a thief. The word hit me like a stone. Every head in that room nodded. My uncle folded his arms across his chest like a judge who had already decided I was guilty. My aunt pressed her lips into a thin, hard line and stared right through me. I sat there with my hands flat on the table and said nothing, because there is no point arguing with people who have already made up their minds. What none of them knew was that my grandmother had spent the last 4 months of her life quietly building a plan, and when the lawyer pulled a sealed letter from his briefcase that afternoon, the whole room stopped breathing. To understand how we got to that moment, you have to understand where I came from. My mother died when I was 12 years old from ovarian cancer the doctors found too late. My father stayed with me for about 6 weeks after the funeral, then drove away to a motel in Reno and never came back. He left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'm sorry, kid," took the good suitcase and disappeared. That was when my grandma Dorothy stepped in. She was 60 years old, living alone in a cozy 3-bedroom house in Hadley, Connecticut, and she took me in without a single moment of hesitation. She never once made me feel like a burden. Every Sunday, she would start her famous chicken soup at 7 in the morning. I can still smell the carrots and the celery and the bay leaf she pulled from a jar that had lived in the same cabinet since 1987. She would snap the blue plastic lid onto the container, hand it to me, and say, "Soup is just love that you can reheat." She meant every word of it. I worked hard to make her proud. I put myself through Central Connecticut State University on late-night shifts at a computer center and earned a degree in information systems. I found a career helping companies protect their data, and I moved about 40 minutes away, far enough from my own life, close enough to drive back for every single Sunday. I came through heavy snow, summer road work, and rain so thick my wipers couldn't keep up. I came because Dorothy Vance was the only person who had ever loved me unconditionally, and I wanted to love her back the same way. While the rest of the family seemed to love her money, I just loved her. That is probably why they never understood me. About 14 months before the day at the lawyer's office, Grandma had a bad fall reaching for a mixing bowl on a high shelf. Her hip gave out on the kitchen tile. When I got the call, I rushed over and found her sitting on the floor, holding a towel to her elbow, trying to act tougher than she felt. I could see the fear in her eyes. Because I wanted her to be safe, I installed a simple security system. 2 cameras, one near the front door and one covering the living room and kitchen. Nothing fancy, just something from the local store. Using my professional background, I set every recording to save automatically to a private, secure account online, paid for out of my own pocket, with nothing ever deleted unless someone manually logged in. I used her email and her password to set it up. Then I did something that would matter very much later. I removed my own access to the footage entirely. When she asked me why, I told her it was her home and her privacy, and the recordings were hers to share or not share as she chose. She laughed and asked who she would show them to, the cat? But she liked the little green light on the camera that blinked twice when it was recording. She said it made her feel like someone was watching over her. The rest of the family was a different story. My Uncle Robert was Grandma's only son, 58 years old, with big hands and a Cadillac he couldn't actually afford. His real estate business had gone badly, and he had borrowed against his house twice. His wife, my Aunt Sandra, spent her days crafting a perfect public image. Church photos, bake sales, while quietly keeping score of every slight against her. Their daughter, my cousin Veronica, was 31 and performed her life online like a celebrity, always showing off things she couldn't really afford on a pharmaceutical sales salary. Veronica had always seen me as a rival because Grandma would mention, sometimes in front of them, that I was the one who showed up even in the snow. To all 3 of them, I was just a handyman or the girl always in the way. They assumed I was there for the inheritance. They never once asked about my job or my life. Not long after Grandma's fall, things began disappearing. First a gold bracelet she had worn to my mother's funeral, then a pair of red garnet earrings, then my grandfather's silver wedding ring from the cedar box on her dresser, where it had sat since he passed in 2011. When she called me about the ring, I could hear the worry in her voice. A week later, Sandra came over with cookies, looked straight at me, and asked Grandma who had keys to the house. Only Robert and I did. Sandra made her meaning perfectly clear. I washed the dishes and went home feeling hollow, trusting that the truth would eventually surface on its own. Then the pearl necklace disappeared. My grandfather had saved his lunch money for 11 months to buy those pearls for their wedding day in 1965. Grandma only wore them on the most sacred occasions. Christmas, the day my mother was born. Everyone knew they were worth around $12,000. At a family gathering, I watched Veronica stare at those pearls the entire afternoon, her fingers twitching. After the photo was taken, Grandma told me quietly that the pearls were for the one who stays. Robert talked constantly about their monetary value. Sandra suggested putting them in a bank vault. They all wanted them, but only one person was actually willing to steal them. As Grandma's health worsened that autumn, more items vanished. A brooch, cufflinks, a crystal vase. Sandra kept whispering to Robert about who had so much access to the house. They were talking about me. I eventually discovered, by accident when Grandma showed me something on her phone, that the three of them had a group text called Vance Family Updates that included her but deliberately excluded me. They weren't just being unkind. They were constructing a story, building a case against me so that when the will was read, I would have no credibility. Grandma's heart was growing weaker. She could barely breathe well enough to bake anymore. She spent her days in the big chair wrapped in the blue blanket I had given her, and I visited 3 times a week, bringing the soup she once made for me. During our last meal together, she looked at the little green light on the camera and told me not to worry, because she saw more than people gave her credit for. 6 weeks later, on a cold Tuesday in December, she passed away quietly. I was the first one there, and I held her hand for a long time. When the rest of the family arrived, they were already acting like guests at a celebration. I found the cedar box while looking for her address book. It was empty. The pearls were gone. At the funeral, Robert gave a speech about love and family. Sandra played the gracious hostess. Veronica filmed parts of it for her online followers. I moved chairs and quietly paid the funeral bills, and nobody noticed. I heard Robert pull the lawyer aside afterward to ask how soon the will could be read. In the weeks that followed, the family began telling everyone I was a thief. Sandra spread it through her church circle. Robert called me to say he wasn't accusing me, then made it unmistakably clear that he thought I was guilty. It felt the way it felt the morning my father drove away, the people who were supposed to protect me choosing to wound me instead. One evening, I went to Grandma's house for cleaning supplies and overheard Robert on the phone, crying, saying he would lose the house without money soon. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then he saw me and immediately started implying I had been in the bedroom, taking things. I thought about the cameras. The footage was all there, saved automatically, untouched, but the system required a verification code sent to Grandma's locked phone, and I had deliberately removed my own access. I had built the system to protect her privacy, and now it was sealed shut against me. Then Grandma's sister, Aunt Margaret, also excluded from the family group text, called and showed me a screenshot. Robert and Sandra had been explicitly planning to frame me for the missing jewelry, so I would be cut out of the inheritance entirely. Reading those words, something shifted in me. I stopped trying to defend myself with words and decided to let the system do what I had built it to do. At the lawyer's office, and Hartford, the room was tense and airless. Robert, Sandra, and Veronica arrived dressed as though they were there to collect a prize. Veronica stood and addressed the room, telling everyone plainly that I should receive nothing because I had stolen from our grandmother. Everyone seemed to believe her. I sat still and said nothing. Then the lawyer, Mr. Aldrich, told us that Grandma had come to see him 4 months before she died. She had known people were stealing from her. She had learned to operate the camera system herself and had saved selected recordings onto a small USB drive, which she left in his care. He played the videos. There was Robert entering the house at night and taking the earrings. There was Veronica sliding the pearl necklace into her purse while Grandma slept beside her. The room went silent in a way that you could feel in your chest. Veronica said the videos were fabricated. Mr. Aldrich explained they were legally obtained and entirely authentic. He then presented a receipt from a pawn shop. Robert had already sold the pearls for over $12,000. The lawyer read Grandma's final letter. She wrote that she had always known I never wanted her money, only her. She left me everything, the house, her savings, and all her belongings. Robert was required to sign a legal agreement to repay $41,000 for what had been stolen or face criminal charges. I did not yell. I did not say I told you so. I picked up the empty cedar box and told them they could keep their lies while I kept the truth. Then I walked out. I moved into Grandma's house. I kept her chair and her recipes. Aunt Margaret comes over every Sunday now, and we make soup together in that kitchen. The same bay leaf jar still in the same cabinet. The pearls came back from the pawn shop eventually, and I placed them in the cedar box where they belong. On my way out one afternoon, I looked up at the camera and saw the little green light blinking quietly. I reached up and switched it off. The truth had done its work. Some lights only need to stay on until the right person finally sees clearly, and Grandma had made sure that long before any of us knew she was watching.